Hi class. So our first video this week is going to be going over some basic terminology that we're going to use with genetics and inheritance problems. So we got a few kind of intro videos, and then further down the line there's a few videos where we're going to be actually working some inheritance genetics problems. And when we do those, this terminology is going to be really important for that. So that's why we're doing this terminology section on its own. Alright, so my terms are going to be really in pairs, right? So the first term we're going to look at is what's called a character. Some of these terms on this list, there's, I don't know, 7 or so terms that are going to be on this list. Some of them you did with the pre-lecture assignment. 1 or 2 of these will be new. Right, so character is a general feature of an organism. A general feature of an organism. So the key thing here is that it's just very general kind of idea. So an example of a character would be something like flower color. Okay, so we were not saying that it's red or blue or purple or whatever. We're just saying, hey, this plant makes flowers, they have some kind of color. So that's a very general feature of an organism. Okay, and then we can look at what are called traits. Okay, and traits are going to be types of characters. Okay, so these are more specific. These are types of characters we would see in organisms. So an example here would be something like red flowers. Right, so we're not just generically saying this plant makes flowers, there's some kind of flower color. Now we're saying this plant has red flowers, so we know the specific kind of trait that that plant is going to have. When we look at genetics crosses, we're going to see both of those. Like we'll often talk about, this is the character we're following, this is the general feature we're looking at, and then these are the specific traits. So in this kind of plant, maybe we have red flowers and white flowers and pink flowers. So those are the kinds of traits we could see for that character. Alright, next is a gene. Okay, so a gene is a part of a chromosome. A part of a chromosome that codes for a character. A part of a chromosome that codes for a character. So remember in the past we drew chromosomes that just kind of look like this. So now what we're saying is one specific piece of that chromosome, I've colored in with orange here, that would be for one particular character, like flower color. Right? So what that means is that the DNA for flower color would be in that particular part of the chromosome. And that particular part of the chromosome is called a gene. And if we look at, chromosomes, especially in eukaryotes like humans, chromosomes are kind of big and linear, and they have a lot of genes, right? So like it wouldn't just be 1 or 2, it would be like gene after gene after gene after gene on this chromosome. It would look more like this. So there would be lots of genes for lots of characters on a chromosome. Okay, and then remember we've kind of looked at so far that the gene is kind of our basic hereditary unit, right? So what we're really passing on parent to offspring are genes that are packaged in these chromosomes. Okay, and when we're looking at inheritance, if we simply said, hey, we're passing a gene for flower color on, that doesn't really tell us much, right? It's kind of like, well, duh, we're passing genes for everything on. That's what it's for, right? So we also have to look at what types of genes are present. And that's what these things called alleles are. Okay, so an allele, these are going to be different forms of the same gene. Different forms of the same gene. Right, so the character is still going to be flower color, but maybe one gene says red and one gene says white. Right, so that difference in color is giving us different alleles, different genes that are for the same character but tell us different things. Okay, and most of what we're going to see with our alleles, there are going to be two types. There's going to be dominant alleles and there's going to be recessive alleles. Sorry, I was thinking traits in my brain. Wrote traits instead of alleles. So you saw these with the pre-lecture assignment. Dominant and recessive were terms that Gregor Mendel used when he was doing his experiments. And it's just a way of expressing what kind of gene, what kind of allele we have present. And then I do want to tell you two other things with this. One is we will always represent dominant alleles with letters that are uppercase. Right? So it doesn't matter what the letter is, but it's always going to be uppercase letters, capital. Recessive alleles are always represented with lowercase letters. Right? So we have a way of knowing just by looking at a letter, we'll have a way of knowing is it dominant allele or is it a recessive allele. Hey, and then I do want to mention that when people see the word dominant, they automatically assume that that means most common or most abundant. And that's not true. It's really, really important. Like so important that you're going to see a question about this in the quiz related to this lecture. Dominant doesn't mean more common or more abundant. I will tell you what it means eventually later on down the line, but it's really important to know from the start that these are just different kinds of alleles, and sometimes recessive alleles are way more common in a population than a dominant form. All right, the next term is genotype. You remember that most eukaryotic organisms like humans or your dog or your cat, most of our cells are diploid. If you remember that from last week, diploid was 2N, which meant that it has two sets of DNA, two sets of chromosomes. And if you remember the picture we drew of the sperm and the egg and the zygote, you know, diploid cells like the zygote have two number 1s and two number 2s and two number 3s, things like that. All right, so this genotype is going to show us the alleles present on pairs of chromosomes. Okay, the alleles present on pairs of chromosomes. So I'm going to talk to you, the next lecture video is going to be on genotypes and these pairs of chromosomes. So that particular one, number 5 here, I'm going to kind of come back to that in its own lecture because that's a really important part of genetics and heredity. Right, so genotype is the alleles present, and then phenotype, basically think of phenotype as what we see. Right, so it's, I mean, you can look up technical definitions, and it's going to say like the physical expression of the genotype. Right, it's basically just a fancy way of saying what we see, right? Whatever the DNA codes for. If this says red and that says red, we see red. Red's a phenotype, right? Now, we can't see alleles in an organism, right? You can't walk up to a plant and go, oh, look, it has a dominant allele. like we can't see that. So the phenotype must always be something that we can see. That's really important. All right, and then the last thing I want to do here is the definition of what are called homologous chromosomes. Homologous chromosomes. And these are going to be chromosomes with genes for the same characters. Chromosomes with genes for the same characters. Right, so we've actually seen these homologous pairs. We just didn't necessarily call them that. So back to that sperm cell, egg cell, zygote picture. If this is a pair of chromosomes in our zygote, say they're both number 3s, and this particular gene here is for eye color. Homologous chromosomes in our definition, chromosomes with genes for the same characters. If the gene in red for eye color is on that number 3 chromosome to the right, it would also have to have a gene for eye color on that other chromosome. Now they may tell us different things, right? Remember, these genes could be present in alleles, which are different from one another. So maybe they tell us the same thing, maybe they tell us different stuff, but none of that matters for this definition, right? It's like if there's a character, or sorry, if there's a gene for a character on one in this pair, there must be a gene for the same character on the other in the pair. And you get these, remember again that picture we did, right? Sperm cell, egg, zygote. So this zygote I mentioned was the beginning of you, right? That's the first 2N cell, and it divides into 2, then 4, then 8, and then the trillions you have in your body. But the original DNA that you started as is in this zygote. And where did that come from? Where did your original DNA come from? Egg cell from mom, sperm cell from dad, right? So what we have is your eye color is half from the sperm cell, half from the egg cell, because this one was from the sperm cell, this one was from the egg cell, right? So we always hear half your DNA from each parent. So that's all this homologous pair is. It's all it means is that we've got 2 number 3s, one from each parent. They both have a gene for eye color or hair color or whatever it happens to be. All right, so we'll use the terminology, especially when we get into working problems that are genetics and inheritance problems. So it's really important to know these definitions.